Hello and welcome to NDTV 24/7. I'm Priyanshi Sharma and our big focus, our continuous coverage of the big G20 summit that India will host. In just a few hours, the big G20 summit will start in New Delhi and the top global leaders have already arrived in New Delhi to discuss everything from climate change, sustainable development to digital infrastructure. Among the top leaders that have already arrived in New Delhi are the US President Joe Biden, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the President of Indonesia Joko Widodo, Prime Minister of Italy Giorgia Meloni. You're seeing those shots of the leaders arriving here in New Delhi. The Chinese Premier has also arrived along with the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He has also arrived here in New Delhi for the G20 summit. Let's also show you the Bharat Mandapam that has lit up to host the G20 meeting. The Bharat Mandapam, the Pragati Maidan, will host this big meeting of the G20 leaders in the national capital. And all these leaders will gather at the Bharat Mandapam on Saturday and Sunday to discuss the most pressing global issues. Now, as the G20 leaders are meeting in New Delhi for the G20 meeting, For India, this is a crucial moment. India has planned several bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has over 10 bilateral meetings still planned ahead for the next couple of days, while he has already completed and had 3 bilateral meetings. First, he held a crucial bilateral meeting with the US President Joe Biden at the Prime Minister's residence ahead of the G20 meeting. Now, India said that these discussions deepen the bond between India and the United States. The joint statement of the bilateral meeting is also out, and it lists several crucial developments for India and the United States. The joint statement states that India and the United States have agreed to take the process forward for India to acquire Predator drones and manufacture jet engines in India. The nations also agreed to build a global semiconductor supply chain. While this is a crucial bilateral meeting that Prime Minister Narendra Modi held ahead of the G20, the Prime Minister also held bilateral meetings with the Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and the Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Kumar Jagnauth. Both meetings were also held at the Prime Minister's official residence, as you're seeing in those visuals. Now, on Bangladesh, the Prime Minister said that the process in India-Bangladesh relations in the last 9 years has been very gladdening. Our talks covered areas such as connectivity, commercial linkage, and more. These are the visuals of that bilateral meeting. Now, on the bilateral meeting with the Mauritius Prime Minister, PM Modi said that the Mauritius Prime Minister and I had a very good meeting. This is a special year for India-Mauritius relations as we mark 75 years of diplomatic ties between our nations. We discussed cooperation in sectors such as infrastructure, fintech, culture, and more. And we reiterated India's commitment to furthering the voice of the global South. My colleague Vishnu Shom is also reporting on the details of the India-US bilateral. Let's listen in.
There's been significant progress as far as the United States and India is concerned on several of the issues which we've been speaking about all day. This is a joint statement in which both leaders, Mr. Modi and President Biden, have welcomed the completion of a U.S. congressional notification which pertains to Hindustan Aeronautics Limited getting into an agreement with General Electric for the manufacture of G414 engines in India. They will now work expeditiously, is what this document says, towards ensuring that India manufactures, or General Electric manufactures, these engines, jet engines, in India in collaboration with Hindustan Aeronautics. This is absolutely critical for our aerospace industry, I beg your pardon. These engines will be powering the next generation Tejas fighters of the Indian Air Force and of the Indian Navy, and it will provide our aerospace engineers the vital knowledge that they need to actually up their game potentially in the future in manufacturing India's own engines. Apart from that, there is clear mention, and I'll read from the statement over here. President Biden welcomed the issuance of a letter of request from the Ministry of Defense of India to procure 31 General Atomics MQ-9B Sky Guardian and Sea Guardian remotely piloted aircraft. These are the drones which we've been talking about. So the request for a letter of request is actually another step, a key step towards the actual commencement of the cost negotiations and the acquisition of these platforms. It's still several months away, I would say, if it is done through an expedited way for these contract negotiations to end. But the fact that it's now there in the joint statement and India has issued a letter of request is all very important. India and the United States also now taking forward what happened in the United States as far as 5G and 6G technology is concerned, a statement reaffirming the semiconductors deal which took place in the United States with a massive investment by an American company into semiconductors for India. That is absolutely crucial to ensure that resilient supply chains exist. What do we mean by resilient supply chains? Well, countries like China and Taiwan have dominated the supply of these conductors, of semiconductors. India wants to ensure that we get our sources from elsewhere. This is crucial for our IT industry. So these are just a couple of the points. There are more than 26, 27 points over here. India and the US are looking at renewable energy, green solutions. They're looking at the aerospace sector. They're looking at the defense sector for startups. There is a lot over here in terms of innovation as well. So this, and also health. So this actually takes forward almost point by point, and it's 29 points in total, point by point, what both countries had decided on, and it shows that India is now going ahead and progressing on these crucial deals and agreements with the United States.
But one big question facing the G20 leaders is whether all leaders will be able to come to a consensus after the G20 meeting. The Indian side is confident. India's G20 Sherpa, Mr. Amitabh Kant, has said right ahead of the G20 that the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration is almost ready and will be the strongest document ever focusing on the Global South. Listen in.
The New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, which many of you will see post the summit, you will see it as a voice of the Global South and the developing countries. No document in the world would have such a strong voice for the Global South and the developing countries as the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. New Delhi Leaders' Declaration is almost ready. I would not like to dwell on it because this declaration will be recommended to the leaders and the leaders will then accept it. And only after it has been accepted by the leaders